Living in a small apartment complex in a sleepy Spanish town, you become accustomed to the rhythms of your neighbors' lives, the morning greetings, the sound of Mrs. Alvarez watering her plants, the laughter of children playing in the courtyard. So, when a new tenant moved into apartment 3B, it disrupted the delicate balance we had all come to cherish. He was a mysterious figure, tall and gaunt, with deep-set eyes that seemed to absorb the light around them. He introduced himself as Senor Marquez, his voice soft, almost a whisper, but he offered little else about his life. From the beginning, there was something unsettling about him, a feeling that nestled in the pit of my stomach like a stone. Senor Marquez kept odd hours, leaving his apartment late at night and returning just before dawn. At first, I attributed it to the eccentricities of a man seeking solitude, but as the weeks passed, curiosity overcame me. The constant coming and going, the heavy curtains that blocked any glimpse into his life, the way the air seemed to chill in his presence, it was all too peculiar for a town as uneventful as ours. One evening, driven by a blend of concern and a nosy neighbor's intrigue, I decided to follow him. I told myself it was for the safety of our community, a justification for the fear that urged me on. I trailed behind him at a safe distance, watching as he moved through the streets with purpose, his steps silent against the cobblestone. He led me to the edge of town, to an old cemetery that had been forgotten by all but the pages of history. I watched from behind the cover of an ancient oak as Senor Marquez knelt before a grave, his body convulsing in what appeared to be a silent sob. But as I stepped closer, the truth of the scene unfolded, a ritual, dark and twisted, with Senor Marquez whispering incantations to the moonlit sky, his hands covered in the fresh earth of the grave. I felt a scream rise in my throat but swallowed it down, fear rooting me to the spot. I watched, horrified, as the ground before him began to stir, the earth shifting as if something beneath was awakening. I fled then, the terror of what I had witnessed lending speed to my legs, the chilling laughter of Senor Marquez echoing in my ears. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with the possibilities of what I had seen. Was it a trick of the light? A figment of my overactive imagination? Or had I stumbled upon something far more sinister, a darkness that had taken root in our quiet community? The next day brought no relief, the sight of Senor Marquez's apartment door sending shivers down my spine. I confided in Mrs. Alvarez, her face growing pale as I recounted my tale. She listened in silence, her eyes wide with fear, and then spoke of old legends, tales of necromancers who walked the land, seeking communion with the dead, their powers of blight upon the earth. We knew then that we had to act, to protect our town from the corruption that had come to dwell among us. A plan was formed in hushed whispers, a desperate attempt to confront Senor Marquez and drive him from our midst. That night, we gathered at his door, the residents of the apartment complex united in purpose. We knocked, once, twice, but there was no answer. The door swung open at our touch, revealing an apartment empty of all but the most basic furnishings. But it was the back room that held the horror, a shrine to the macabre, with symbols etched in blood upon the walls and a collection of items that spoke of rituals most foul. The police found nothing when they arrived, Senor Marquez having vanished into the night, leaving behind only the echoes of his dark practices. The apartment was sealed, a silent testament to the terror that had lived among us. In the weeks that followed, our town returned to its peaceful ways, the memory of Senor Marquez fading like a bad dream. But the fear remained, a shadow that lingered in the corners of our minds, a reminder of the evil that can hide behind the guise of an unassuming neighbor. I walk past apartment 3B now, the curtains drawn, the door locked, and I wonder about the man who brought such darkness to our doorstep. The mysteries he carried with him remain unsolved, a chilling tale of caution in a world that is not always as it seems. Our quiet Spanish town learned a valuable lesson that beneath the veneer of normalcy, horrors untold can dwell, waiting for the chance to emerge. And I, once a simple neighbor, am now a guardian of sorts, watchful of the shadows, wary of the strangers who come to our door. For in the tale of Senor Marquez, we found a truth far more frightening than any folktale, that sometimes, the most terrifying stories are the ones that happen right next door. In our secluded apartment complex in the German countryside, life had always been serene, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name and children played freely under the watchful eyes of the community. That tranquility was shattered the day the new tenant moved into apartment 12. He was an odd man, Mr. Schneider, with a quiet demeanor and a gaze that seemed to look right through you. He kept to himself, rarely venturing outside except for his nightly walks, always alone. We tried to welcome him, as was our way, but he rebuffed every attempt, his door always closed, his windows always curtained. The children of the complex were the first to sense something amiss. They whispered tales of seeing shadows move behind Mr. Schneider's curtains, of eerie sounds that emanated from his apartment at night. We adults dismissed these stories as the product of overactive imaginations, a reaction to the arrival of someone new and unknown. But then the disappearances began. 3 children, Anna, Lucas, and Marie, went missing on a crisp autumn afternoon. They had been playing near the old oak tree that stood as a silent sentinel at the edge of the complex, their laughter a familiar soundtrack to our peaceful existence. When dusk fell and they did not return home, panic set in, a cold dread that gripped the hearts of every parent. Search parties were formed, the police called in, the entire community mobilized in a desperate effort to find the missing children. Days turned into weeks, with no sign of Anna, Lucas, or Marie. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Suspicion naturally fell on Mr. Schneider. His reclusiveness and odd behavior marked him as an outsider, a convenient scapegoat for our collective fear and despair. The police searched his apartment, but found nothing out of the ordinary, just the sparse living quarters of a man who preferred his own company. I couldn't shake the feeling, though, that we were missing something. Driven by a need to understand, to uncover the truth for the sake of the missing children, I began to watch Mr. Schneider, noting his comings and goings, the way he avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in his hands. It was during one of his nightly walks that I decided to follow him, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. He led me deep into the woods that bordered our complex, his steps sure in the darkness. I kept my distance, using the skills of stealth learned in my youth to remain unseen. After what felt like hours, he stopped at the entrance to an old bunker, its presence unknown to me despite my years in the area. The bunker was a relic from another time, its purpose long forgotten. Mr. Schneider looked around, as if sensing he was being watched, before unlocking the heavy door and disappearing inside. I waited, my mind racing with possibilities, before gathering the courage to approach. The door was ajar, a sliver of light escaping into the night. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my senses assaulted by the smell of damp and decay. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors and rooms, the air heavy with silence. I moved forward, guided by the faint sound of movement ahead. It was in the bowels of the bunker that I found them, Anna, Lucas, and Marie, locked in a makeshift cell, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear. Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by rage. I freed them, their small bodies clinging to me as we made our way back to the entrance. Mr. Schneider was there, waiting, his expression one of resignation. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were never meant to be found." I didn't wait to hear his explanation. I pushed past him, the children in tow, emerging from the bunker into the cold night air. We ran, the terror of the bunker propelling us forward until we reached the safety of the complex. The police arrested Mr. Schneider that night, his secrets unraveling like threads pulled from a tapestry. The bunker had been his project, an obsession born from a twisted desire to create a world apart from our own, a place where he could control everything, even the fate of 3 innocent children. The complex slowly returned to its peaceful existence, the horror of what had happened a dark stain on our collective memory. But the tranquility we once took for granted was gone, replaced by a wariness, a knowledge of the evil that can lurk behind the facade of normalcy. As for me, I can't help but watch the shadows, the edges of our idyllic life, wondering what other secrets lie hidden, waiting to be discovered. The tale of Mr. Schneider and the bunker has become a new folktale, a warning whispered in the night, a reminder of the darkness that dwells in the hearts of men. In our close-knit community, where doors were seldom locked and neighbors were more like family, the invitation to a party hosted by Mr. Thompson, the friendliest among us, was met with enthusiasm. Mr. Thompson, with his perpetual smile and generous nature, had always been the cornerstone of our neighborhood. So, when he announced a grand soiree at his home, nobody hesitated to RSVP. The evening of the party arrived draped in anticipation. Laughter and lights spilled from Mr. Thompson's house, welcoming us as we made our way inside. The atmosphere was electric, a testament to Mr. Thompson's knack for bringing people together. As the night progressed, the air buzzed with conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the rhythm of music that seemed to pulse through the very walls of the house. It was nearing midnight when the unthinkable happened. The festive atmosphere shattered as masked intruders burst through the doors, their movements swift and calculated. Panic ensued as they brandished weapons, herding us into the living room with a professionalism that chilled me to the bone. The confusion was palpable, the fear a tangible thing that clung to each of us as we tried to comprehend the turn of events. Mr. Thompson was among us, his expression one of shock and fear that mirrored our own. He pleaded with the intruders, offering them anything they wanted if only they would spare his guests. But as the night wore on, a horrifying realization dawned on me. Mr. Thompson's interactions with the intruders seemed rehearsed, too smooth for a man supposedly under duress. My suspicions grew as I watched him closely, noting the subtle nods and barely perceptible gestures that passed between him and our captors. The truth hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Thompson was in league with the intruders. This party, this gathering of his nearest and dearest, was nothing but a ruse, a carefully orchestrated trap designed to rob us of our valuables and, as I would later learn, much more. As the intruders began to move among us, collecting jewelry, wallets, and phones, Mr. Thompson's eyes met mine. There was a flash of something dark and triumphant in his gaze that made my blood run cold. I realized then that I was witnessing the unveiling of a monster, a man who had worn the mask of the genial neighbor so well that none of us had seen the true darkness lurking beneath. The hours that followed were a nightmare. One by one, some guests were taken away, disappearing into the night with the intruders. Their screams echoed in my ears long after they were gone, a chilling reminder of the fate that awaited them. Rumors would later circulate of a network on the dark web, a place where people were bought and sold like commodities, and I had no doubt that Mr. Thompson was a part of it. I was among the lucky ones, spared for reasons I still don't understand. Perhaps it was the chaos of the moment or a simple oversight on their part. But as dawn broke and the police arrived, Mr. Thompson was gone, vanished into the ether with the shadows of the night. The investigation that followed unveiled the depth of Mr. Thompson's depravity. Hidden rooms were discovered in his house, their walls lined with monitors that displayed various feeds from the dark web, a digital marketplace for his human merchandise. The friendly neighbor, the cornerstone of our community, was revealed to be a puppet master of the most macabre puppet show, orchestrating horrors beyond comprehension. In the aftermath, our neighborhood was never the same. The trust that had once bound us together was irrevocably shattered, replaced by suspicion and fear. Mr. Thompson's house stands empty now, a haunting reminder of the night when our innocence was stolen. I moved away not long after, unable to bear the weight of memories that clung to every corner of our once peaceful community. But no matter how far I go, I can't escape the nightmares that follow me, the faces of those who were taken, their screams a constant echo in my mind. The party that was meant to be a celebration of friendship and camaraderie turned into a night of terror and betrayal, a chilling testament to the darkness that can hide behind the most benign facades. Mr. Thompson's treachery taught me that monsters are real, and sometimes they live right next door, smiling and waving, as they plot their next unspeakable act.